Formula One is a sport that remembers its greats Schumacher, Senna, Fangio. But for every driver who is immortalised in the minds of fans, there are champions whose legacies, despite their success, fade into the background. One such name is Alan Jones, a world champion, a relentless competitor, and the driver who led Williams to its first ever title. Jones dominated the very late 70s and early 80s. And yet his name rarely comes up in conversations about Formula One's greatest champions. Why is that? Was it his decision to retire too early, the stalled comeback, or simply the passage of time? This is the story of Alan Jones, the forgotten champion. Born in Melbourne, Australia in 1946, Jones was raised around racing. His father, Stan Jones, was a successful driver in his own right, winning the 1959 Australian Grand Prix. But young Alan would have to forge his own path, moving to Europe in the early 70s to chase the Formula One dream. It wasn't easy. He battled through the brutal world of junior formulas, often struggling with underfunded teams. But talent shines through, and by 1975 he had secured a full-time seat in Formula One with Hesketh before later moving to Surtees. It wasn't until 1977 with Shadow that Jones got his first real breakthrough. That year he stunned the paddock by winning the Austrian Grand Prix, his first Formula One victory. It was a drive that showcased his resilience and aggression, traits that would define his racing style. That win would put him on the radar of other teams, and it wasn't long before Frank Williams came calling. In 1979, Jones joined Williams, a team still finding its footing, but with big ambitions. The partnership clicked almost immediately. By 1979, Williams had built a competitive car, and Jones emerged as a consistent front-runner, winning 4 races that season. But it was 1980 where he truly left his mark. With the FW07, Jones was unstoppable. He combined raw speed with a tough, no-nonsense attitude, never afraid to go wheel to wheel with the best. That season, he won 5 races and clinched the championship at the penultimate round in Canada. He had done it. He was a world champion, and Williams had its first ever title. But just as it seemed like he was entering his prime, things began to unravel. Despite still being at the top of his game, Jones made a decision that would alter the course of his career. He retired at the end of 1981. At just 35 years old, he walked away from Formula One, citing exhaustion and missing the Australian lifestyle. It was a move that many would view later as premature. But Formula One wasn't done with Alan Jones. In 1982, Ferrari approached him to drive the second car at Monza following the death of Gilles Villeneuve. Here was a golden opportunity, a chance to drive for the most famous team in motorsport, but Jones turned it down. Why? He felt he wasn't race fit, having stepped away from the sport just months earlier. It was an opportunity missed, and Ferrari would instead turn to Patrick Tambay. Had he taken the seat, could he have added another championship to his name? We'll never know. By the mid-80s, the racing bug had bitten again. Jones attempted a comeback in 1983 with Arrows, but it was short-lived and uncompetitive. Then in 1985, he was lured back once more, this time with the American Haas Lola team. It was a project full of ambition, but ultimately, the team never had the resources to compete at the sharp end of the grid. By 1986, Jones's Formula One career was truly over, and he had to accept that the sport had moved on without him. But Alan Jones wasn't done with racing. Returning to Australia, he turned his attention to touring cars, which would later become what we now know as V8 supercars. Unlike some F1 drivers who struggle with the transition to heavier, more robust cars, Jones adapted brilliantly. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, he remained a competitive force in Australian motorsport, securing race wins and podiums in one of the most fiercely contested touring car series in the world. So why is Alan Jones not as revered as some of his fellow champions? Part of it comes down to timing. His career was sandwiched between the dominance of Niki Lauda and the rise of Alain Prost, meaning he was never truly the face of an era. His decision to retire early also robbed him of the longevity that cements a driver's legacy. And unlike other champions, he never had a defining rivalry. No Senna vs Prost, no Hunt vs Lauda. Instead, Jones was a tough, uncompromising racer who got the job done, then walked away before history could fully appreciate his greatness. Alan Jones was a world champion, a fighter, and a pioneer for Australian motorsport. His achievements laid the foundations for future Aussie stars like Mark Webber and Daniel Ricciardo. While his name may not always be mentioned among the sport's greats, his contribution to Formula One and beyond is undeniable. He was, and always will be, a champion. Tell us what you think about Alan Jones. Has he been undeservedly overlooked as one of the F1's greats? Leave your comments below, and remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into racing history. Stay tuned for the next chapter of the Racing Chronicles. Thanks for watching.